everyone, it's Jill from Today's Creative Food, and I'm going to show you a recipe that I love and have made quite a few times. It's my carrot cake cupcakes. That's a lot of C words. Carrot cake cupcakes recipe. You can see I have one that's decorated, which I'm taking a whole bunch to a women's event tonight, but you can also just make them without any icing at all. It's packed full of nutrients as well as just sweet goodness. So I want to show you this recipe. I know you're going to love it. I'm going to tell you a few of the tricks of the trade in making these cupcakes, and so let's get started. Before we get started mixing, let me go over all of the ingredients. You're going to need 1 1/2 cups of flour, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1/2 cup of white granulated sugar, 2 eggs. You're going to need about 3 to 4 medium-sized carrots to grate. You're going to need 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla and 3/4 cup of canola oil or vegetable oil, and 1 1/2 cup of walnuts, and all the different spices and baking soda. So you're going to need 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and just a little bit of milk if you have it in your refrigerator. And that's it. So let's get started baking. So in the bowl, I'm going to add my 1 1/2 cups of flour, my 1/2 cup of white sugar, 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar, and go ahead and mix all that together first. It's really important that you incorporate all of your dry ingredients together. You never want to dump it in and never stir it, especially when you add baking soda and baking powder. You get those clumps of taste in a baked good when you know they haven't stirred it well. Now we're ready to add our cinnamon, nutmeg, baking powder, baking soda, and salt. If you need to be careful with salt, you can definitely omit that. So I'm just going to mix this really well. This is going to make anywhere from 12 to 14 cupcakes, along with a cream cheese frosting for the top. Now the one thing I love about this recipe is it's a 1 bowl recipe. So I'm just gonna make a well, and now we're gonna add our oil and our eggs and the vanilla and the milk. So before I add the oil, I just want to talk about adding moisture into a cupcake, cake, any type of baked goods. Sometimes it calls for oil and sometimes it calls for butter. And in this recipe, it does call for oil because it needs a lot of moisture, because of the carrots and the walnuts are going to extract some of that moisture. Butter, although it does add a lot of flavor, it doesn't have the moisture ingredient as much as oil does. Now let's talk about the oil. Now this is calling for canola oil, but you could use vegetable oil. You could also alter other types of oils, but remember, it's going to change the taste. If you add coconut oil, it's going to have a little bit of a coconut flavor, which isn't bad with a carrot cake recipe. If you add olive oil, you're going to get that rustic olive oil taste. So be aware that when you add different types of oil, you're going to get a little bit of a different flavor. Vegetable oil, canola oil doesn't have a lot of flavor, so you're really taking in the carrots and the sugars and the walnut and all those other ingredients to actually bring in all of the flavor along with the vanilla. So this is just a little bit of information that might help you out in this wonderful recipe. All right, let me pour this in and then add the eggs, vanilla, milk, and then we're ready to grate the carrots. All right, we're ready to add our liquid. We're going to add 3/4 cup of oil. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of milk and 1 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, which is a lot of vanilla, but you need flavor. This recipe, we'll just do half of that. And then 2 eggs. And now we're going to mix it all together. Just start dumping that dry ingredients on top and mix it really well. You can use a blender, but with this recipe, because you're going to add the carrots and the walnuts. You just want to get it nicely mixed. Now we need to grate the carrots. So we need 1.5 cups of carrots grated. So I peeled the carrots, washed them and peeled them, and now I'm just gonna grate. Now you can use a food processor, but you know, for all that little bit of work, you don't really need to get your food processor so dirty because we're only using the grating for the purpose. So go ahead and just grate. Turn on some music. Once I have this all grated, we're going to add the grated carrots and the walnuts, and then we're ready to bake. So this would be a perfect time to preheat your oven. You always want to put baked goods into a preheated oven so it starts to bake right away, especially if the ingredients call for baking powder and baking soda. All right, our carrots are done. They're grated. I have 1.5 cups of carrots. I'm going to dump that in. This makes a really hearty, delicious. You do not have to add walnuts or pecans. You can omit this for sure, especially if you know anyone that has a peanut or nut allergy. So make sure you know that ahead of time. But I am bringing this to a women's group tonight, and they will know. I will let them know. I'll put a little note on there that there are nuts in here. I always worry about having nuts around kids when I bake because sometimes they don't know. And if their parents aren't around, and I'm a preschool owner, so I'm always careful. So I would have omitted the walnuts if I was making this for any of the kiddos at my school. All right, makes a really hearty dough. So now we're going to put them into our cupcakes liners and then bake it at 350 for 12 to 18 minutes depending on your oven. Using an ice cream scoop, it really does make it easier to get them into your cupcake liners. I do double line my liners so that it doesn't create too much heat on the sides of the cupcake so that the middle of the cupcake bakes a little bit better. Now these are ready to go into the oven, and let's see how beautiful they turn out. So now I'm just going to decorate with some cream cheese icing that I made. You can find the recipe on my blog at Today's Creative Food.